Well, being a journalist in Ukraine is no joke. Over and over, we've been told that Vladimir Zelensky's Ukraine is a bastion of democracy. What you likely don't know is that in this so-called democracy, journalists who question the government could be faced with charges of treason. I'm investigative journalist Ben Swann, and let me give you an example of this. One of the most unknown facts about the war between Russia and Ukraine are the large numbers of civilians who have been forced into Ukraine's military. Now, Ukraine's draft forced all males from 18 to 60 to register. Imagine that happening in the United States. Even as Ukraine's government reportedly refused peace talks, it required by force that all men stay in the country and fight. And that requirement turned journalists who previously had been strongly in support of Ukraine to question their own government and military. One of those journalists is Ruslan Kotsaba, whose experience took him from a hardline Ukrainian nationalist to an impassioned pacifist. And that change of heart landed him in prison. When we explain how and why, we will continue to leave Zelensky unmasked. Journalist Ruslan Kotsaba had been widely considered noble by his followers. After criticizing Ukraine's military draft, Kotsaba was arrested on charges of treason and obstruction of military operations. Kotsaba would soon become Ukraine's highest-profile prisoner of conscience. He spent 524 days in solitary confinement before finally being released, only to face new charges. He has since sought political asylum in the United States and resides in New York.
И, соответственно, я думаю, что проблем с убежищем у меня не будет, но мы же понимаем, если, допустим, сейчас Америка, она, наверное, один из основных бенефициаров этой войны, которая в Украине, ну, соответственно, могут какие-то быть политические влияния на суд, который должен мне.
Journalists who oppose the official narrative have been imprisoned, others killed.
I was born in Dallas, Texas. I lived there when Kennedy was assassinated. I remember it. Pretty wealthy family, very conservative like that. But I grew up understanding why black people wanted equal rights, why young men didn't want to get sent to Vietnam.
Russell Bentley was an American veteran who lived in the Donbass. He moved there as a volunteer, fighting for the local resistance. He retired from fighting to help spread the word of what's really going on there.
I've made a lot of good videos, and that one wasn't even particularly interesting or effective, but it went super viral. It got like multi-million views within the day, you know.
The video that he mentions here, it went so viral that it got him big attention from unexpected places.
But not every American is on the right side. One feisty little fella from Texas went so far as to join the Russian army.
It's chaos on the front line with the denazifiers and liberators of Ukraine. These guys are tough, these guys are ready, and there's plenty of them. So far, Russia has used about 10% of its military power, and we're getting ready to bring the hammer down. These guys are gonna save and liberate all the good people in Ukraine, and the bad people, boom, kick their ass.
What a spunky little piglet.
Played the whole 40-second video on his show and talked a bunch of shit about me. You know, a bunch of really stupid shit too, by the way.
A year after Bentley granted us this interview, he was killed while filming in the aftermath of the Ukrainian attack in the Donbass. And sadly, he isn't alone. 27 journalists have been killed since the 2014 coup, according to the Committee to Protect Journalists. And 18 of those were killed after Zelensky took office in 2019. In 2021, a full 12 months before Russia's invasion, Zelensky shut down 3 oppositional TV channels, claiming they were pro-Kremlin. If you can believe it, this grim picture got a whole lot worse after February of 2022. At that point, all news channels were shut down and only a relative few were allowed to continue airing, except for on a single channel, which is regulated by the government.
I was arrested on April 15th of 2022 by the State Security Services.
Gonzalo Lira was eventually released after his first detainment and granted us an interview, but he was reluctant to answer many of the questions we posed out of fear.
I don't want to create the conditions or the excuse to lose my liberty at this time. And so I'm going to have to decline. But I'm happy to do so once the conflict is over.
Gonzalo Lira did not live long enough to give us a second interview or to see the end of the war. A political prisoner in Ukraine, he died in January of 2024, reportedly of pneumonia. Days before he died, Gonzalo smuggled the following note out from the hospital in which he was held. Quote, "Tell my sister I have double pneumonia, both lungs, as well as pneumothorax and a very severe case of edema, swelling of the body. All of this started in mid-October, but was ignored by the prison. They only admitted I had pneumonia at a December 22nd hearing."
So the media continues to paint this conflict about democracy, even though Ukraine is increasingly banning religions, outlets, journalists. So if you suddenly say, yeah, but there's all of these things going on that are very undemocratic, how do you sell that to the American people?
Now, media censorship in the United States is starting to parallel Ukraine's draconian policies, under the guise of reining in so-called Russian disinformation. The Twitter files reveal that, at the behest of the Ukrainian government, the FBI tried to censor journalists who complicated government narratives surrounding the war in Ukraine. According to a congressional report, this didn't just happen on Twitter. Also at the behest of Ukraine, the FBI tried to censor content on Google, Facebook, and Instagram.
Нас, пацифистов, не любят обе воюющие стороны. В любом конфликте пацифистов называют агентами противоположной стороны. Допустим, если в Украине меня называют агентом Путина, то я думаю, что в России российских пацифистов назвали бы агентами Коломойского или там Зеленского.
In an interview with the Democratic Socialist magazine Jacobin, Kotsaba stated, quote, "All opposition figures previously promoting the peaceful resolution of conflict with Russia have either fled or are in prison. Any thought about peace talks is perceived as playing for Putin, as the work of enemy agents." Sound familiar? The same blueprint used in Ukraine to control opposition to the war or silence anyone who speaks out against the escalation of it are called Putin's mouthpiece. We have no doubt the same attacks will be made against this series, but it won't deter us from speaking an unflinching truth. Ukraine is no bastion of free speech or democracy, and no true journalist should be silent about that. Next time on Zelensky Unmasked, we're going to look at political persecution in Ukraine. It's not just journalists who aren't allowed to stand up to Zelensky. We'll explore the locking up of dissenters and the banning of political parties as we continue to leave Zelensky unmasked.